Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We will be starting shortly, so if everyone could please take their seats, those who have not. Yeah, fine. All right. Oh, no, I think it's just the other one. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On this very rainy, typical Melaka morning, I would like to welcome all of you. In fact, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to today's event, organized by the Friends of Melaka Museums, here represented by our chairman, Isik Shaukani Abbas. And this event is a trialogue between the author of this wonderful book, The Story of Pedro Theseira, the Fisherman, namely Martin Theseira, as well as Mr. Colin Goh and Professor Margaret Sarkisian. And of course, I am very much glad to introduce a couple of close friends and at least one relative who will be taking part in today's trialogue. First of all, let me start with, from the left, Professor Margaret Sarkisian, Professor of Music and Chair of the Music Department at Smith College, Massachusetts, and President of the Society for Asian Music. She is also the author of The Albuquerque's Children, Performing Tradition in Malaysia's Portuguese Settlement, as well as the Cantiga de Padre Sacham, and many other articles on the music and dance of the Portuguese and Baba Nyonya communities of Melaka. And she has been doing research here for nigh on 3 decades. Actually more than 3 decades, and so she is also a constant fixture of our local scene. Secondly, I would like to introduce the dashing figure in vibrant batik right next to me, Melaka born and bred, also from the same school as myself, St. Francis Institution. Another fixture of the Old Town and the churches in Melaka, St. Francis Xavier in particular, a font of knowledge of our local history, and I'm not just saying this because he's my uncle and grand-uncle, depending on where you look from. And before I move on to the most important person here, I would like to first introduce the subject of our trialogue today. So, to start that off, I would like to start with a reading from the book of Alfred Russel Wallace, The Malay Archipelago. So Alfred Russel Wallace, a contemporary of Charles Darwin, if you may have heard of him, was very often in the Southeast Asian, or the Malay Archipelago as he called it, okay, and he was at some point also in Melaka in the middle of the 1800s. And this was what he had to say about the population of Melaka. The population of Melaka consists of several races, and I will be taking the parts relevant to the Portuguese community here. So he continued by saying, next come the descendants of the Portuguese who still keep up the use of their mother tongue, though ruefully mutilated in grammar. The Portuguese spoken at Melaka is a useful philological phenomenon. The verbs have mostly lost their inflection, and one form does for all moods, tenses, numbers, and persons. You vai serves for I go, I went, or I will go. Although for those who know Kristang better, they will know that by adding certain words, it actually does help to distinguish whether you are talking about you have gone or you are going. So adjectives too have been deprived of their feminine and plural terminations, so that the language is reduced to a marvelous simplicity, and with the admixture of a few Malay words, become rather puzzling to one who has heard only the pure Lusitanian. In costume, these several peoples are as varied as in their speech. So particularly about the Portuguese patronize a light jacket or more frequently shirt and trousers only. So with that, to set the context of the Portuguese community, the Kristang community in Melaka, let me move on to now introduce the author of our book today. Okay, let me just hold that up. Okay, so this is a copy, all right, and just to let everyone know, it is a very special treat for all of you today, because you will be able to get one of these for the wonderful price of 25 ringgit at the table in front. And not only that, you will be able to get it autographed by the author himself. So, Mr. Martin Theseira, last but not least, a son of Prior Lane in Melaka, and living in Prior Lane, which by the way used to be right next to the sea, his life has always been shaped by a very strong bond to the sea. And he followed in the footsteps of his father, and as well as many others in the community, in becoming a fisherman. And he has, however, always been passionate about his community, his language and culture. Now, he has turned his attention to capturing the essence of the Kristang community and culture in short stories, which has resulted in this book, the first of its kind. So before I move on to the event proper, let me have a few important messages. First of all, I would like to urge everyone to keep their phones on silent for the entirety of this session. Secondly, please hold your questions, note them down, and keep them until the Q&A session, which will be following right after this trialogue. And perhaps most importantly, the toilets will be at the back of the building next door. So you just walk out the front, turn right, and go to the building next door, and right to the back, the toilets are there. So I guess that concludes my introduction. I will now hand the floor over to the speakers themselves. Thank you very much. Please welcome them, everyone.
Both Amen, it's still morning, and I admire you for turning up today despite the heavy rain. In local Kristang, we would call it Chua Gatu and Kacholu, which means it rained cats and dogs actually. So even the Portuguese actually, local Portuguese here use that term, translated. So with that, we begin our trialogue, and I would start the ball rolling by inviting Martin to give us a little bit about his background. We've heard a little bit about it, but maybe we can have a little bit more in detail. What we would like to know is what are his roots, the locality he came from perhaps, and his dreams for Melaka perhaps. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you everyone for coming here. Sorry, like Colin said, the chua gatu ku kacur, but I want to add, this kind of weather, usually the toilet is very useful. So if you are like in this kind of weather, carry by miza. Carry by miza means you want to go to the washroom with this kind of weather. So okay, I thank Colin, thank Margaret for making themselves free to come today. I'm really honored. I feel, so elated that the book has stirred a lot of interest. For me, I think it's a lifelong really achievement. I also like to thank Shaukani when he first offered that, he will get the Friends of Melaka Museum to support the book and help in the book launch. Obviously, I would have not done it well without the help of my good and dear friend Audrey Lim, who read the book for me, which I felt was something on my own I would have not accomplished. Because I think she told me one very important thing in writing short stories. It's to write it in the present dramatic tense. I think that I learned that tip. That is very important because me and Anthony, my co-author, we had actually a bit of a problem earlier about the tenses and all that. So I think that at least now set the path that you're not going to write it in that form. And I think it's very important too. Not forgetting Melissa. Melissa will help me rearrange my book in terms of photography and a bit of selection of photographs. In fact, the photograph proper, the front was actually my third choice. Not a third choice, it was my third draft in a sense. But finally, I felt that Malaysia had a better view of that photograph. If you look at the photograph, you see me there, and you see one stranger. A lot of people asking who is that guy. Anyway, that guy is a guy actually I knew many years in 1978 when I was working in the restaurant. I have no contact with him anymore. But that photograph, if you look carefully, is I think the best of all the three I selected. Why? Because when I was working there, number one, is the fish. If you look at the fish, it's a red fish. Now for Chinese, I think the red fish is Ong. Because when we were doing the signboard, so the guy was saying, you know, you're going to have the fish red and facing the sunrise. If you look carefully. And on top of that, I noticed also that there's the word open there. I mean, all the things really match. And most importantly, I saw the number 7 on my t-shirt. Yeah, so I felt it was a perfect photograph for my book. Earlier was a photograph of a boat and fish. Not very clear. And the second one was actually my dad in his boat next to the jetty, but not really reflecting what actually the book was all about. But I think this one, yes, it really, I think everything was all in sync. So, okay. I was born in Priory Lane, I grew up in Priory Lane, and life in Priory Lane was actually, you know, really, for me, it was paradise. How Malaysia is paradise. My back door was the Straits of Melaka. You know, I used to fall asleep with just the sound of the waves. So beautiful. You know, and then that's why I got very late. I was really enjoying life. You know, we had this sing-along at the seaside, we played guitars, we organized festivals, we did caroling, we did a lot of things, right? That's why I want to try and bring back all these fond memories of Priory into short stories. And not only that, try and include the people that were around. My grandparents, my aunties and uncles, everybody had a story to tell. My good friends, my family itself. If you look at the photographs, a lot of photographs are photographs of the family, or our get together. That's one thing I really treasure, family get together. I mean, it is really money cannot buy. And I really miss Priory Lane. I miss that family that we used to have after midnight mass, after the festivals. It was beautiful. So okay, I grew up in Priory Lane, and eventually I finished school. I went to do a small business in KL, in Bangsa. It was thriving in fact, but I couldn't take the life. Life was too demanding. Sleep at 4 or 5 o'clock. You know, I got these musician friends come after their work. I have to go to work at 6. Go to the market. So no, I finally closed shop 9 months and I came back. And I went fishing. So I started off actually going with my uncle, and then eventually I had my own boat. I became a taikong. Not only that, I owned 2 boats. I had another friend who also went with that boat, besides the boat that I went with. So I had to give up fishing in 1988. I was forced to give up when the retribution came. And when my uncle passed away, my companion, I was forced to give up. But luckily, I mean, with God's grace, I had an inborn talent of learning to cook. So I went into pickle making. And from 1988, 89 until today, pickle making is my source of income, my livelihood. And I love cooking, so okay, I keep the standard of what I cook. And eventually, like I say, now I don't live in Priory anymore. Now I had to go to Ujung Pasir, which I'm also quite fortunate to live there because I still can connect with the community important. I still can connect with the church, which I'm very fond of. I can still connect with my friends, also very important, and the environment. If I was thrown in one corner, I think I will not be here today. So I thank God for actually giving me a place in Ujung Pasir, and it was just lucky. Like, I was looking for a house, and my cousin was giving up his house. And and my wife went into the house and said, okay, I want this house. So okay, we saw apartments in Melaka Raya and we bought this house. Obviously not with the money we had, we didn't have much money, we had to take a bank loan. Still paying today, I think we got about 18,000 left, but thank God we bought that house. That time it was really cheap, now it's almost, 5 times more. So, I don't want to go on anymore. So that is actually basically how I grew up, and I had that love for the sea and the people that was all around me while we were growing up. Yes, thank you.
Over to you, Margaret. Yeah, to us, Martin.
Hi, I'd like to just thank everybody for inviting me here today. It's a great honor to be talking about a book by a member of the community, and that's what I think is so important about this. Scholars like me can come and go, and there's many of us who have been here over the years, and we write our research and we publish our books, but very few of them are available to people here. So it seems to be kind of a little bit of, I don't know, you wish people could connect more with the work we do. But that's why it's so important for local people to take up that task of writing about their own lives. And what I think is so important about the book, Martin, and I'd like you to talk more about it, is why for your first book you decided to really focus on the annual cycle. So basically the book follows the life of Pedro around a year, and the year marks the important events. So can you talk a little bit about why you made that choice?
Okay, thanks, Margaret. In fact, it was quite natural because I was into organizing, I was into tourism promotion. In the very beginning, my dad, he always tells me we have to promote the culture, the language. And my dad is actually with Bernard Santamaria, one of the founding members of the Melaka Portuguese Cultural Society back in 1967-66. So I was already actually into that kind of, in that path of tourism. So it was actually tourism calendar events. So I felt it was important because it tells you very clearly about how, from the very beginning, New Year, we celebrate our festivals with family, with friends, with the natural environment, and finally end up with Christmas. So it was quite natural actually. So I told Anthony, I said, we will base our book on the calendar of events. And then Colin added a little bit more, better still. It's based on the Catholic liturgical calendar, which I think then makes more sense because if you see the festivals of the Portuguese community, basically, it is all related to the religion, to the faith, to the saints. From the very beginning, we go to church, thank God for the good year, pray for a better year, and all that. So if you see carefully, it's very, very connected to the religion, to the faith. And I think also, if it was not for that commitment of faith, I don't think I would be here also. I think the church has already played a very big role in keeping the community together. Yes, and then, see, even Shaukani is very open to it. I'm glad, because some might take it a bit more sensitive, because it's quite more church, more religion. But he's got a broader perspective. It reflects the community, basically. I say the religion played a very important role in our survival all these years. So obviously it's so connected. I think that's one of the main reasons why I chose that format. And obviously, it's so beautiful when you talk New Year's, what you do on New Year's Day, how you come together. Because I say it was just natural. Because that's what we were actually enjoying all these years in Thailand. And also in grandmother's house, in auntie's house. If Colin knows Thailand, I think he knows. He knows my grandmother's house was there. My auntie Jeannie's house was there. My auntie Christie's house was there. My cousins were there. And all the good friends were there. And we came together very spontaneously to prepare for the Feast of Assumption, for the Feast of St. Anthony. So it was just natural. And I feel that there's more than I definitely can write, because there's so much of experience, so much of stories that need to be written, because these stories that we had as family, as community in Brian Lane, and even a little bit in Portuguese settlement, because we used to organize, like for example, we organized the Feast of Holy Rosary. So that one year we did a sea procession, we went to Portuguese settlement, and they had a whole day of prayer. It was so beautiful. The last, I think, if it was done was in 1958, when Father Pintado also initiated a procession into the sea. Okay, so it's like very natural, and I feel strongly that these stories must not be forgotten. And also one more reason why I also want to write is because I actually, when my father passed away, I did see Origin. I said, I'll write my father. And he says, please, because she wrote about her father. But then, it became like one day postponed, and eventually it just faded out. But when Anthony came, my co-author, Dr. Anthony, he came to me, and as he put that proposal, I jumped on it. Really, I said, this is the thing, And then we set a deadline. Okay, he said, no pressure, it cannot be done within the San Pedro. We do it Christmas. I said, no, San Pedro. But actually, I had a bit of stress with the earlier part. So because I'm not so used to the kind of stressful, you have a deadline, and all that. Because I was a fisherman. My life was a carefree life. I really enjoyed my life growing up as a fisherman, as somebody in the kampong. So, and then I managed to manage my stress. Actually, I had a slight stress for that 1 week. So then I decided, no, I have to do it at my pace, but the job must be done. The target was set. Yes, thank you.
Just to
answer the question.
To follow up on that, what I think this shows so clearly is how the really deep values of the community. You can really read this in the book. So you talked about the faith and the religion, and that is the centerpiece, but also that deep connection to the sea that you talked about. But also there are other things in there: food, music, games. At the same time, it seems very idyllic in this rendering of your story. There's it's very, very bucolic, very, very idealized. I think we, maybe know that there was a little bit more rivalry between the different communities. For example, the Prior Lane group and the Portuguese settlement, particularly the boys. Would you like to maybe say something about that?
Okay. In fact, the rivalry was real. Those days, especially during town hall, New Year's Eve dance, or even some special Merdeka dance, always end up with a fight. Always, no, it's true. But then now it's different because of the intermarriage between the settlement girls and the settlement boys with Prime girls in Penduduk. I'll give you an example. Carol Denker, she met Ange. Ange, notorious guy from Friday, gangster, really notorious. But they ended up marrying, and then it became like, slowly, in fact, that rivalry subsided. Today, maybe a little bit because they say that you are from Prior Lane, but not as bad as before. Sometimes you just get a little bit of uneasiness because so many people sometimes involved. So, but I decided to set a goal, and I decided to do what I can do. In fact, we are also now doing an initiative to get the kids to come and participate in music and song. So we started a weekly class. Very good attendance, 7, 8 of them. You can see that the interest that is in the kids. So okay, we will start small. So between the two, the rivalry I think now is not as bad as before. So yeah, we can find common grounds to work. No worries. I can work with anybody. Yeah. No worries.
Maybe I can elaborate a little bit on rivalries. Actually, besides the priming group is an older group than the Portuguese African group, and besides Prior Lane, in the old days it was Prior Lane, Bandar Ele, Bungaraya here in this area. There were pockets of Kristang living here. Then we had areas closer to Jonker, in particular Kubu and Portuguese Street, leading on to a bigger community in Trengkera, from where I come from. So these were the original areas where the Portuguese descendants resided. And then when the Portuguese settlement was set up, the poorer amongst these groups were selected to have housing there. So that's how we had the Portuguese settlement in, just to give you a little bit of understanding to the rivalry and who made up the settlement, where they came from, actually. There's no such thing as original settlers there, but they came from these areas, actually. And also, speaking about the language, I think there were differences in the way of talking in that particular unique language of ours, because there would be intonations that would be different from Prior Lane against Trengkera or Bungaraya even. So unfortunately, I mean, I've heard how they speak things like that, but I don't think this has been really studied. Yeah,
Okay, from my experience, you know, I always, in fact, we had a small chat group, Jacinta Lazaro, this Alfonso de Silva, Netanyahu was around, and a few more people. So I always tell them, the Grangrum, do you know what's Grangrum? Thundering in the deep. Yeah, Grangrum. So what Colin is saying is quite true. Another example, the word kepiting. You hear it in Trengkera, but not in Portuguese settlement or Prailiu. We will say kangrezo. And kepiting is a Dutch word, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sergey. It's actually a Dutch word. Kepiting as in crab. So what Colin is saying is true. Sometimes you have a bit of different intonation or the way it's pronounced in the different areas. Because basically Trengkera was having a bit of the Dutch influence, I would say. So maybe some of the words they assimilated. And there's another word I can't remember now, but these are the words actually when we have funerals we talk about. So when we come together during funerals we'll talk about this. So this was told to me by an Alcantara guy, I can't remember his name, but we were talking about this. And but on the whole, the language is still very easy to understand from both sides. Just a little bit of the intonation and maybe some of the words that we use. Strange, so small community, two small places, but still there's a bit of a difference in words that we use or even how we pronounce the words.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, because we can talk about dialects. We talk about dialects amongst Chinese languages, but it's really worth remembering that even with such a small community as the Kristang community, in the past, when they were living in different areas, even of a single city, there was slight dialect differences. But of course, a lot of that has disappeared in the modern age. I think it's quite interesting that even though the communities that lived in other parts of the town have been dwindled to non-existent in some of the areas, right? And more people have ended up in the Portuguese settlement or the surrounding areas, in Ujung Pasir in particular, the area where Martin now lives. There are still remnants of awareness as to who came from where. And I think when the Portuguese settlement was established in the 30s, the people who moved in first, as Colin said, were really the poorer communities, and they all lived on one side, primarily along Jalan Theseira, and the roads on the other side of the middle road, the Albuquerque Road, came up later, and a lot of those were homes built by families that came from Tranquera and other parts of the city. And there's still some awareness of those differences. I think you're right that a lot of those have dissipated over time, particularly through intermarriage. But I think people still, would you say, remember some of those differences?
Yes, I was thinking this Alcantara guy, what's his name? I can't remember now. I mean, he had a few other words, I can't remember also. So it's what actually I want to do. I want to try and record all these different words that were said for different things in Tranquera and how it was said maybe in Brisbane or in Priory. Because this is slowly disappearing. And there's not many really old people, you know, that can give you these stories. So actually we are racing against time. Anyway, I made a few appointments with some very elderly people. One is Patrick De Silva's wife, and a few more people to record. One more is Oswald Gunting. He knows a lot. You know, he told me, you know, how to see whether the pregnant mother will have a boy or a girl. Some said, uncle, don't need uncle, no, they scan only. I said, no. I said, you know, so Oswald told me, you see, you look at the tie, I don't know, it's true, I have to check. One line or two lines? One line is a male, two lines female. I don't know. So I have to just maybe get stories from a few people and then maybe come to a conclusion. But that's what he said. And Oswald, up to today, he does the traditional urut. Even people from KL pay him a lot of money, 8,000 for 1 month urut. Pay everything like the child. Because there is a certain ritual, a certain kind of way to urut the mother. Okay, and then the food that she takes. And then there's also the way how you must urut the child. That's the nipple for boys. Sick or not milk. I don't know. I never heard that. But I heard people who say it's true. So I want to record all this. See, Oswald is one of the last of his generation. None of his brother, Francis, younger to him, know a little bit, but I think doesn't know more than Oswald. So these are the people I want to record. I want to hear the stories. So I'm going to invest in a recorder, but Margaret said, no need, the headphone can. So I think I'm doing that because it'll be more comfortable for them, you know. Because these are important, like I said in the book, I want to document it, I want to collaborate, I want to try and document it and keep this information as much as possible, and then we can archive it, we can put it in the resource center, anybody can use it later, especially the young generation.
Okay, Martin, we're coming quite close to lunchtime, and I think we ought to talk about food. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kristang food especially.
Okay. Food for me is it's like you say it's in the blood. You know, I was born lucky. I had that love for cooking basically. So when I married, okay, before that, when I was cooking my fish pickle, I'll give you an example. I don't use alba seeds. And then when I married my childhood girlfriend, she's Indian descent, I used alba because that really enhances the flavor of the fish pickle. Only for fish pickle. Not for any other mango or so I had that interest. So I also have that natural, I would say. I'm so happy and glad God gave me that talent. I am very particular about taste, I'm very particular about presentation when it comes to food. So, okay, I'm blessed with multi-talent. I love singing. I still sing for the choir. I still sing for the family when we get together. So I'm blessed with all these talents, and I really thank God for it. It's also because of the environment I grew up in. See, when we were kids, we were growing up, the environment was so important. We learned the guitar naturally. We learned to cook naturally. And, you know, it was just learning from our elders how they make cakes. So my next series will be about this particular man I mentioned, Gondol. Now he's actually the handyman in the community. And then I found out that his name is Robert D'Souza, his real name. So this guy is a very interesting guy. He's a handyman. He can do house repair. He will help all the aunties and the assos and the bibi to tend to the fire when they are doing their cakes. And then he's a very interesting character. He takes opium buds for his strength. And he's a very humble, very lovable guy. He can do anything. He can carry sand, he can carry water, he can tell old stories. So I want to write about him. Find out a bit more and write about him. Because he's very interesting characters. Okay. Thank you.
Martin, if ever Martin invites you for lunch or dinner, don't say no. Because I can tell you, it's really something of a paradise for the palate, actually. You know, you would enjoy Kristang food. Never mind about how spicy it can get, but there's always water to cool you down, not to worry. Or for Martin, there's always beer. Yeah. So, Margaret, sir.
I think turning to food is also something that really makes another point that is very important about this community. It's unique. It is something that has developed over hundreds of years, but it has developed in a location. And that's what's so important, because as we get little glimpses in Martin's book, particularly the Praia Lane community, they were not a single race in that community. It was very mixed. So you talk about the Chinese shopkeepers who could speak Kristang. Even in the Portuguese settlement, which was more exclusive, more simply for the Portuguese, but still there were people there who had a presence in that community. I'm thinking, for example, of Jenny and her coffee shop. She just retired recently, but she had been working in that coffee shop as long as I've been there. But her father had started the coffee shop there, so probably that family had had the coffee shop maybe since close to the inception of the community, at least 60, 70 years. But she was Chinese, spoke Kristang fluently, and knew everybody, knows all the fishermen, because that's where they would stop before they went fishing. They'd go there, have coffee, and then go off when the tide was right. So this idea of the mixing of communities is something that is so distinctively Malacan. The harmony, and that shows in the food as well, because the foods are there are a lot of crossovers, and maybe we can talk a bit about that. But what was very interesting was that in the old days, some of the women would also cook in the houses of the Babanonias at particular times of the year, and so they would pick up other influences and bring them back and create something very, very, very multicultural. And I think that's something that in the present, with the young people not being as connected with their roots here in the ground, and becoming more connected through social media with global culture. And I think, sadly, some of the intentions, the best intentions of people from Portugal coming here and saying, this is a Portuguese community, loses that really important thing about this community, which is that it is a community of this place. And it's so rooted in Melaka. Do you want to say something a bit about that?
Yeah, okay. I mean, Margaret was saying about our grandmothers, our aunties who worked for the nationalities. It's very true. This Auntie Grace Di Melo, I think quite a number of people know Auntie Grace Di Melo. So we also cook pongte. We also cook chap chai. So we learn from the Nyonya ladies, and they learn from us the kari level, or the kari seku. So that intermingling, that fusion of food, cultural, way of doing things, I think in Melaka it's quite unique. Okay, kalau nak talk about keluak, in fact those days nobody know keluak except the Portuguese Eurasian people. Yeah, it was cheap, 10 cents maybe, but fairly natural. Now it's a $1, even $1 you cannot get good ones. And this keluak was sold by I wrote there, talking about keluak, I write a story about this old man. His name I think is, I can't remember the old name, but he was quite a big man. He wore his Arab descent, I think he wore his sarong, check sarong, and then he would come with a trishaw. So the seller was a Malay Arab descent, and he used to come and sell in the kampung. Nobody buys except for the Eurasian community. Then slowly maybe the keluak went into the Nyonya cuisine. So maybe our aunties and that. So they had a taste. Today it's one of the most favorite dishes you can find in any Nyonya or restaurant. And also now I think even many other people have learned how to eat. And it's become, like I say, so difficult to get good ones, and it's become a bit expensive. And the thing is, I don't know how we ended up eating maybe 10 pieces of keluak one go. In Indonesia, they only put 2 or maximum 3 for flavoring, not to eat like that. I don't know how come we ended up eating like that. Strange. My brother used to cook for one gentleman in KL. Among the family, each get it 20. Once they order 100, my goodness. So okay, now I'm experimenting to do keluak sambal with any seafood, any meat, nice. But the keluak must be really cooked and salt. 3 pieces enough. You put in your chicken, let it really, but obviously there's a bit of ingredient, like some chili. But the taste of the keluak, fantastic. You do it with prawn, you do it with sotong, first class. You do it even with fish also. Really good. Instead of sweet sour fish, you try keluak, maybe fried fish. Okay, fried fish with keluak, sambal, perfect.
And to follow that up, it's not just food where you see this incredible fusion. It's the same with music. The real traditional music of the kampung is branyo and matakan tiga, which is a sort of like very similar to a pantun concept where you have singers who exchange verses. That part has almost died out, although Martin has been trying to start to revive that. But joget and branyo are very, very similar. But also the musicians, again, in the same way that they combined in terms of food, they combined in music. So something like Dondang Sayang, which is very characteristic of Melaka, was something that everybody participated in. So they would have Dondang Sayang sessions down Puchina, where they would have Malay musicians, Baba musicians, some Eurasian musicians would go out there and they would just jam together. And it's really cool seeing this starting to come back. Yesterday, I don't know if anybody saw this, but there was a wonderful Keroncong performance there. Martin's again he's got a finger in everything, I think, but participating in reviving the Orchestra Keroncong Melindo. And that was just amazing, seeing an ensemble. This was probably one of their first few public performances. And there were, I think, 3 Malay musicians, 3 Baba musicians, and a Eurasian musician, and a Nonya singer. So this notion of this kind of multiculturality and this sort of flowing between the cultures is still there, and at least certain people like Martin understand the value of it. And so I'm really happy to see that going on. He also mentioned the importance of archiving, and I think that's also something that's worth stressing. I mean, getting old people to talk about the stories. We've been talking about getting the children in the ukulele group eventually to start going and asking their grandparents, do you know any pantun, any matakantiga verses? Can we collect them? But as he pointed out, we're at a moment where there's not so many old people left to ask. So the time is important. But also don't forget that there are people like myself and Brian O'Neill and Alan Baxter and the other scholars who've been here. We have archives, and we talk amongst ourselves how to share that. I have hours of recordings of Akono Felix, Papa Joe Lazarou talking about their music and their traditions. What we need to do is find a way to archive that in a sustainable fashion, so we can talk more about that over time, but that material should be shared for the community.
Thank you, Margaret. Actually, I really appreciate, because I mean, if we look carefully, we have always been, I would say, fortunate. You see, even our priests of old recorded a lot for the Rego and a few more for the Timtahi. So we have material all over. Now it's just to get it together. Like I was saying, we can try and get it archived, and then this definitely will be used for all. I even spoke to Patrick de Silva's son, Sebastian, recently at San Pedro, and he promised, Martin, if it's for public use, yes, I will share my information, because he was given a grant some many years back. He did a lot of recordings of the festivals, of the happenings. So all those are very important material, very important information. Because what you had then is no more now. The people that he spoke to or get some information are no more. So all those are very vital information. What Margaret has done over her 30 years of her work in Melaka, and Brian O'Neill, and all the rest. So I think, I think the time is right. Thank you very much, Margaret. I think we have to work on this and see how we can collaborate, how we can bring all this together. And it is for the future generations. And not only for them, it's for all to please come to know the community better, and it's there to be shared to everyone. Thank you, Margaret.
So we're coming close to the end. So I think we can recap now with Martin having the final say, perhaps, before we have question and answer. Martin, maybe you'd like to add something? I know you're a bit thirsty.
No, sorry. Actually, we are more hungry. Anyway, balik kerja for me. Especially when it rains, balik kerja for me means feeling hungry because the energy is all being burned up because it's raining outside. Happy hour, okay, it's one. Happy hour I cannot afford. Food I can. Usually when we have any get together among friends, food no problem. But drinking you have to bring your own. So anyway, like I was telling earlier, what I wanted to do is actually very clearly written in the book. The collaboration between Singapore, between even Margaret from overseas and all those that have come and done research, even Alan Baxter who has done the dictionary, that's indispensable. For me, that dictionary I think is so important because I'm not really I would consider myself a native speaker, but I hear to be one. And that dictionary, very indispensable. It gives you the real, shall I say, real thing, I not feel that way. Because he was a native speaker, and then Baxter, I think, also was a linguist, so the combination was great. And it was just in time before Patrick passed on. You see, we are quite lucky. You see, if you look carefully, our journey has been blessed. That dictionary could have not happened if Patrick died earlier. But it was published. Sadly, it's not being republished, but maybe this can be done later. But definitely, we want to collaborate. We want to cooperate. We want to work with all the communities, even communities of the Nyonya, the Chetty, even the Malay community. Like Kronchong is so beautiful yesterday, and I was so glad Margaret did everything. At least I can I need to practice because they're so beautiful. And then coming together in that kind of atmosphere of a Chinese festival with so much of Malay input, so much of others coming in, It's the first time they're having that kind of festival. Maybe some not comfortable with it, but for me, I felt it's the first time I walk along Harmony Street. You get the bila calling, mari, 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 masuk makan nasi lemak, mari, mari, mari. I never felt that way. So how should I say, open. I felt that was what was very important yesterday. Because usually they will be a bit very, strict, very not so welcoming. But yesterday he was calling, he called Masai, he called Chinese, he called everybody, come, makan nasi lemak. Because they were serving nasi lemak in the mosque. And I heard they served roti canai in the Indian temple. And in Chongqing, I think they served vegetarian food. So it was actually a very good idea. Yeah, maybe a bit of fine tuning, but I think on the whole it was good. So coming back to the topic of working together, collaborating, that is definitely the ultimate aim, is to try to put all our resources together, and maybe hopefully, like I say, we come with a very good center where we have this information, and it can be, anybody can come and access and do research. See, Jerry Menendez had that idea, but because he didn't maybe have a longer time, so he couldn't accomplish. But definitely, that will be my ultimate dream. So we try to work on a resource center, we try to collaborate, we try to collect information as much as we can, and have that center going as soon as possible for use, for everybody to use. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just in time, because I think there's a grandroom, is that what we call it? But instead of in the deep, it's on top of us. So I think now we will open it to the floor for any questions and answers. I think the first one goes here. What?
Actually, I have two things I'd love to hear you talk a little more about, and they come out of, hi, it's me. They come out of the historical study, and I'm wondering, in your youth in Praia Lane, what you thought or heard about these things. And one is that 50 years before the Portuguese settlement was ever created, I read something about the community in Tenkara and the community of Praia Lane in Intrudu. And at Intrudu time, the one would go and serenade in the other community, and then the other would come back and serenade in that community. A way of, and in one case, I think they were talking about guitars, and the other case, accordions. That's one question, and I don't want to, there are other questions as well, so you don't have to answer. The second question I had was about the sugarcane at the Assumption, Feast of the Assumption, and when you first thought about or heard about, when you were growing up, this sugarcane planted around the Feast of the Assumption, and why did you do that? Those are my two. But what was your experience growing up with either one of these things? Thank you.
But sadly, I didn't really experience the running Rudia. I think that was actually much earlier. Yeah. And definitely they used to walk from Praia Lane to Portuguese settlement. That I knew. Because those days, there was still access along the beach from Praia Lane to Portuguese settlement, because that's how they used to walk even to church. From the Portuguese settlement, they walk along the beach to Praia Lane. So the Brani Rudia actually started more or less in Praia Lane, and they walk along the beach to Portuguese settlement, or could have been vice versa. I don't remember about any accordion. I don't remember, maybe violin possible. I think violin, because those days I knew quite a lot of old people. I was told even old grandmothers can play violin. I was told, but I didn't had the chance to experience Brani Rudia. But during my time, we did Brani Rudia, we did a settlement only. By then, Praia Lane was already cut off because of the reclamation, because of new development, some roads were closed. So we did Brani Rudia only in the settlement, and it was just the guitar, maybe when Maghrib was around, there was the accordion, and when I think there was one, I think Alvin did with the ukulele, did it with the violin, and then Morris mine, not played the combo. So that was quite basic. But I can imagine the fun, how it was from Prior Lane walking along the beach to Fisherman. And those days people made a point to follow the group, and it snowball kind of thing. So you end up with a big group, and eventually they end up at the Padang or some space, and then they will finish up there. And then obviously if you sit in Trulu, then there will already be some other program to raise a bit of money by selling cakes. You see the book, it's quite clearly mentioned that there's no change even if you buy any cake for that day. So that money is all used to organize it. That one I remember, we did that. But seeing them travel or walk from Friday, that I did not really witness. Okay, and then the other one about the sugarcane. Okay, sugarcane basically, my reference is actually Bernard's book. Now Bernard has got two interpretations. He says actually because in this part or that part of Melaka, Banihile, the suburb of Banihile, there were travelers, writers who said that there was abundant sugarcane in that area because basically that was the agricultural part of Melaka, whereas Trenggalek was more the business, the commercial, if I'm not mistaken. So Banihile housed the fishermen and those who were involved in agriculture. And then there was this gentleman by the name of Vincent Di Mello. Recently when he was still alive, he used to plant sugarcane at his backyard, especially for the Semayang Tikong. Yeah. And the sugarcane was nice and straight and beautiful sugarcane. So that ground in Prior is very rich, and there's always, like I say, water running underneath. You just dig maybe about a meter, you have water spouting up, Prior, lots of water. So the ground was very, very fertile, especially the sugarcane. And the other interpretation is there was in the fortress of Melaka the Cathedral of the Assumption. And those who patronized that Cathedral of the Assumption, obviously the priest of Our Lady of Assumption was their patroness, and that was definitely very grandly celebrated. So when the Dutch took over Malacca, well, I don't use this word, the Catholics were persecuted, but I would just say that they were maybe suppressed, they were oppressed a little bit. So the religion or the celebration of the Assumption, which couldn't be held publicly, was taken maybe into the hinterlands to be celebrated in secret. So obviously in this case it was taken to the sugarcane plantation. This is what is being written, and I think it makes a bit of sense. So it was this community that lived in Banihile, in Prior Lane, that area, who had great faith in the Cathedral of the Assumption. Obviously the feast they celebrated very grandly, so they continued their celebration in secret away from Dutch authorities. And why is sugarcane used is because maybe our ancestors thought they wanted to at least remind the succeeding generation of those difficult years. So use sugarcane as a symbol. If the question is asked why we use sugarcane, the story will come out. And actually it's true. Because I had a priest who said mass and he asked, I think Father Ignatius Swab, he passed on. He asked, why are you sugarcane? So when he heard the story, he was quite amazed at the story of the sugarcane. That we are using it actually to try to bring back or remind the succeeding generations of those difficult times. So it's a wonderful tradition. And that is only celebrated in Melaka. You have the Assumption Church in PJ. You have also one in Penang. They don't have sugarcane because they don't have any historical story behind it. We have. That makes all the more unique using sugarcane. Thanks.
Just for your information, Martin mentioned the term intrudu. I don't think many of you are familiar with it. So let me tell you that the term intrudu here locally is the poor man's equivalent of the Mardi Gras of Rio de Janeiro and New Orleans. It's always that the Sunday before Ash Wednesday, where period of fasting and abstinence begins for the Catholics actually. So Intrudu means actually our own Mardi Gras, actually. Okay?
Directly, Intrudu means introduction to a new season, according to the liturgical calendar. So Intrudu means introduction from the ordinary season or from the Christmas season to the season of Lent. Yeah. Lent is like our puasa, that 40 days of fast, abstinence, alms giving, charity.
Could I add a couple of things? Many years ago, I wrote an article in which I collected sugarcane stories, not the sugarcane story. I started asking people why they're sugarcane, and I got many different stories. And you referenced the story in Bernard's book. Well, we then went and asked Auntie Ginny, Bernard's mother, and she gave us even different story. And so Bernard never asked his mother why the sugarcane. But that's really interesting because the fact that there were, turn your microphone off, because the fact that there were so many stories is really important in showing how communities develop and thrive, and each story had a little symbolic meaning that referenced something else. But it was fascinating hearing how many different stories there were.
But I want to know the story that Auntie Ginny told you. I hope I answered your question, Jerry. So you have more interpretations. Later, I hope to hear from Margaret.
Hello everybody, just a little bit more introduction about Martin. There's this book called The Melaka Sketchbook. Not selling this book, but then the authors are the late Chen Yun-Fi from Adanya, and Mr. Chin Kon-Yit, who was the artist. Before they finalized this book, they actually came down to Melaka and they had a personalized tour by Martin before Praia Lane was gone. I think that was very precious. So you know Martin is actually quite well known. Further to that, 3 Japanese ladies who made a book on Babanyonyas from Singapore to Penang actually went to see Martin cook. Right, so he's also now well known in Japan. Right, so the early communities before the Portuguese settlement, Martin, Trangkera, Kampung Serani, Praia Lane and Bandar Hili, they were all very near to the sea, right? And then Kampung Serani is somewhere after Jonker Street. So Kampung Serani is Portuguese Street now.
Portuguese Street, Kubu.
Sorry?
Portuguese Street and Kubu.
Ah, yes, the area. So they are like a bit further away. Is it, do you think is Melaka River compensates for that, you know? No? Because I was just wondering that, you know, most of the Portuguese communities are near the sea, you see? Right, another thing, we had a short revival about the Ting Ting. Maybe you could tell them about the Ting Ting and whether, you know, there will be a revival about this. Thank you.
Okay, with regard to Jalan Portugis or Jalan Sarani, my great grandmother came from this place called Kubu, where you have Jalan Portugis. Because I don't remember, but my sister is about a year elder to me. She said she visited my great grandmother in Kubu. So like I said, I don't really know, but I'm going to call in. The people who came or who started to live in that vicinity were people who went there during the Dutch occupation of Melaka. So they stayed outside the fortress. You see, the communities that were found in these areas were already back there, you would say. See, they were in Bahagian, obviously, those involved in fishing, agriculture. Those who lived in Kristang were basically employed in the government. They had maybe employment, and they were in the commerce. Okay, those maybe also lived in Bunga Raya. I think they were also of that category, and even Kubu. So that kind of the river was basically those who were the aristocrats. Those who were in government and in the commerce. And this half of the river where Banile is basically agriculture, fishing, those kind of things. Okay, the Ting. Actually, the book is Ting. There's, I think, a bit of a confusion there with the word Ting and Ting. If everybody remembers, we had that Ting hopskip, and that hopscotch. So that, I think, is Ting. Somewhere along the line, the Ting became Ting. Because I don't remember Ting as what was meant to be the triangle we go around singing to collect ang paos in Chinese New Year. But I didn't want to make it confusing, so I just stayed with the Ting. And later maybe I will try and get information from other sources to verify the Ting and Ting. Because I had a deadline for the book, I didn't want to, so I just went with the Ting because the poster was Ting. Okay, Ting actually is basically, I even found out that even young girls go and do this kind of strolling, kind of impromptu singing to collect ang pao. So they get now they chabot go back home. Oh, okay lah, whatever. So okay, the last real Ting group was made up of Maurice Di Mello and Peter Fernandez. Usually it's a 2-piece or a 3-piece. So sadly, Peter Gomez also died at a young age. He was one of the best mouth organists around. He could blow almost any tune. Japanese, Chinese, any tune he could blow. And Maurice obviously he's a drummer, he plays the tambour. So these were the one group I remember. And I was also told there was this another group, Uncle Bonnie, I think this was from Trankera. Now they were more professional, proper dress, and they went outskirts. And then they were basically playing the trumpet, drum, more professional. One more reason, one that my uncle told me why they do it out of the main area or the city is because they are shy, So they do it out in the the smaller areas or the outskirts. But the collection is much better. The ang pao is bigger, especially you play for those maybe people who don't hear or don't have these kind of things in the hinterland. Their ang pao is very big, and they give you ready to makan cukup. So much so sometimes they come back almost tipsy already. So they travel by bus. So basically it's just to go around to collect a bit of ang pao. I personally went Ting, but just for a short while. But there were people who took the opportunity, especially during Chinese New Year. But you also must know the timing to go in, not simply go in. Sometimes you go in the wrong time, they chase you away. Because they have their rituals, so you must know when to go and when not to go. So something maybe I have to do a bit more research, and definitely my aim is one day to have a Ting group to pay a visit to our Chinese friends, definitely. Because it's part and parcel of the thing that I also learned. And then we can get this thing going. Yes.
To Martin, 2 questions. Question number 1, what was the happiest thing you have done for the Kristang community, and why Martin did that? Question number 2, where the public can get this book after here. Thank you.
Sorry, the first question again. Sorry. Oh. To tell the truth, everything I did was happy. I never had a poor ending. Why? Because I felt that what I did with my heart, and I gave my best. Yesterday we had that small session with the kids. I love kids. I used to teach catechism. So I just like to see them pick up some good habits of learning to an instrument, to sing, and then coming together and inviting their friends. That has been something I had it since I was young. And I love to organize things. I love to, like I say, sing in the choir, get involved in the conjugal, like Marcus, I got my fingers everywhere. But because I feel I just want to try to get involved, learn, and then maybe set up one for our own community. Get our boys and girls to slowly maybe learn the accordion, learn the ukulele, learn the violin, and it's our own group. In fact, I also friends who say, Martin, you get the boys and girls, I provide the instrument, you set up a Godang Sayang group. So I'm taking all this very seriously. Even the Checo told me, Martin, you get your boys and girls, I'll come and teach the accordion, I'll come and teach the violin. So for me, it's a passion. I just love to do all this. Then I only pray for good health. That's actually the only thing I really pray for. There was a question the Chokani asked. You did this book for money. You cannot make money selling books these days. You can maybe cover your costs a little bit, yes. It's for the passion, it's for posterity, it's for the future, it's for the community. Oh, sorry. The book actually at the moment is it's at Melissa's place. I have some books. Actually, this is the only place that is at the moment being sold in Melaka. I'm trying and get maybe another person to help me sell in Singapore, and maybe one in KL. I've not gone to that stage yet because I need to travel to go. But in Melissa's place now at Benari, you can buy the book at 21 anyway. Okay, I think there's a proposal to buy. I think Chowkani has tried to help me, and we're working on it. I think, eventually it must be online. Yes.
Okay. Could I just go back while we're waiting for the next question to something that Joe asked a minute ago, and that was about the residential patterns, because I think that gets into something very important. Martin is really talking about the fishing community, whether it was at Praia Lane or the Portuguese settlement. But that wasn't the only part of this community, and there was a fishing community in Tranqueira as well. But there was also class distinctions within the community. So there were people who were better off, who had more education, had government jobs, as Martin just said. And then those people were often called the upper tens, a bit disparagingly. And the people all met at church, but they didn't necessarily socialize. And so I got some wonderful account by Horace Santa Maria and also Sister Dot of what it was like to go to church, to go to St. Peter's in those days. And the wealthy people would pay what they call pew rent, and so they would have pews that they could sit in. And Sister Dot told me about how she would just wait as a child to see what all the Rodriguez girls were wearing that Sunday, and because they all come in the same colored dress or something like that. So there were those kinds of distinctions. So people who were living in some of these other areas were not directly connected with the sea. Or even some of the people in Banda Hilir, there were people who were teachers who were in that middle ground between the Portuguese, the fishing community and the upper Thames. There was also a middle community. So it's important to remember that, so you can look at where people lived to get a sense of where they were positioned in terms of education, affluence, or lack of. So it's important to remember that.
Hello, Mr. Martin. My name is Haris. So I have this question more a bit about food. So you've mentioned that you went to KL to sell your ikan bakar, grilled fish. So anyway, I think you are familiar with the different kind of grilled fish sold there. Since KL, you have people from other parts of Malaysia. And unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to try ikan bakar in the Portuguese settlement. So what I'd like to know is that what makes ikan bakar there different from other parts of Malaysia, and then is it you learn that culture from other ethnic, or other ethnic learn that from your culture? Because I'm sure it is different from where I came from. I'm actually from Sungai Petani Kedah. I came all the way from Sungai Petani Kedah this morning. So if you go to Kedah, we have one place that is very special for seafood, which is in Tanjung Dawai, and I'm sure the taste, the fish that is grilled there is much more different than what you have here in Melaka. So anyway, can you share that perspective on the difference between what the Portuguese is known for? Okay.
Okay, for starters, I think that there is this basic asado or asada in the Portuguese menu. I'm talking about Portuguese in Macau or in Portugal. They have this kind of grilled fish. Actually, we didn't have this Portuguese big fish. This was actually an invention. I'm quite sure of this by this guy by the name of Mr. Charlie Overy. Now, Mr. Charlie Overy, he was working in the RMB and used to travel to Johor, which is like Muar area, you know. And I think Muar is very famous for his otak-otak. Okay, and this I'm just putting a connection. Now he started this recipe. Actually, it is rempah sayur. Rempah sayur is just basically shallots, fresh chili, no dry chili, fresh chili, a bit of grass, and a very important ingredient, belacan. This is the basic. So he came back with this, he used to go part-time fishing, he used to come back with lots of fish. So one day he just did this rempah sayur and just put on his fish, wrapped it with banana leaf, that time no foil, just put, and then it turned out great. And that recipe actually is his. He started it in Praia Lane with his friend Manuel Santa Maria. And then they shared the thing with, because we're all fishermen. So I don't hear of big fish before that. And then his Manuel Santa Maria's brother opened a restaurant in 1977 in the Portuguese settlement. That was one of the most popular dishes that they had there. Nobody else was making good fish. Maybe Margaret can verify. And it was from that restaurant, Restaurant San Pedro, with the photograph in my book. It went to their restaurants, and it's now one of the most popular. Okay, in terms of what we have here, or in Sungai Petani, you say, or even in Sertam, it's different. Because theirs is just plain baked, and they eat it with a sauce. Which is what actually how we used to do as kids. As kids, we just put it on, those days, I think Anthony can remember, my good friend. We used to wait for the fishermen to come back. Ikan cincaro. Those days, our fishermen go right deep and get ikan cincaro. And then when they come back, just hold the boat and give you 5 ekor. Just push the boat. They give you 5 ekor. The ikan cincaro, it's not ikan cincaro you buy in the market. No way, the taste. Ours is just exceptionally tasty and really lemak. We just put on fire and eat like that. We just drop some oil in it. So, ikan bakar, I say, it was not an original dish. I mean, for us, or now it's called the Melaka or the Portuguese big fish. It was just this guy coming at that rempah sayur of those 4 ingredients that I told you, just put it on, did a paste, put it on. But the important ingredient, I think the important thing is the banana leaf. That gives the extra oomph. And one more thing, it must be done on charcoal. That is the all very important small tips. You can do it on hot plate, but it wouldn't be the same. Try doing it on charcoal. My uncle used to buy big fish. My uncle married to my auntie. His Chinese like big fish. He buy the fish so big. And those days I don't use foil. I just use wire and turn. Sometimes the gravy will spill on my hand. But beautiful. You do it on charcoal with banana leaf without foil. Perfect. So obviously the ingredients also important, the amount. But basically just what say 5 chilies, fresh chilies. You can put 1 or 2 dry chilies, just give it a bit of color. You can buah keras, maybe 3 or 4, not too much. maybe just a small piece of belacan and shallots. That's all. Lepas sayur. Yeah, one more thing. The limau purut. That one I think is also important. That's about all. Banana leaf. So you got the ingredient already, you can start a shop. And over the years, it has just like become different tangan lah, you know. There's one guy called Aliam, in Friday, if you remember. Wow, he was a hit. But he used dry chili, maybe to save costs, to cut costs a little bit. But turned out to be right. I mean, I'm not sure right. Turned out to be nice. So, and then you go to KL, they put serai also inside. I heard. But you put serai, it's already lari already. Because ikan bakar should be sambal recipe. You can put serai, you can, but it becomes a different dish. It's not ikan bakar really. You know what I mean? So, ingredients is important. Ingredients should be fresh chili, a bit of two dried chili, belacan, grass, shallots. Banana leaf.
Can I add to that? Somebody, I won't mention names, who was writing a cookbook, and they were going around all the old ladies. And you've got to remember that every house has its own version of every dish, right? So, so when the book, this very glossy book, was finished, a lot of the old aunties wanted to see. Because this person had come around everyone's house asking, what is your recipe for this or that dish? And so some of the old aunties couldn't read very well, so they asked me to read the recipes to them. I read the recipes, and every single one of them started laughing and laughing, and they said, well, I told her everything, but I left out one ingredient. And so the variety of recipes is important, and also don't always believe what you see in the cookbooks, but experiment a bit yourself.
I wish to add to that because when I went to Penang for one festival, the Penang Eurasians cook curry devil differently. You go to Singapore, they cook it differently. So I learned one thing: no recipe is 100% correct. It's how you develop in your own community the taste for maybe putting in something that we don't put in Melaka. Melaka is very basic. It's basically just potato, no carrot, nothing. That's the only thing that they put. But in Singapore they put this what do you call it, sausages. They put cabbage. They put what do you call this carrots. So I will not say that they are wrong. They have that, maybe their taste, and for them is wonderful. I was given a treat at the Eurasian Association in Singapore just about a month ago. Entirely different. The constituency is really different. You eat the one in Melaka, Kenneth, what's his surname? I think one of the best curry I tried. Really authentic. That's the word, authentic. I mean, I'm not saying that theirs is better or ours is better, no, but the authenticity of the dish, the color, all important. Curry cannot be so too pale. The color is important. That's the first look. So no one recipe is 100%.
Alright, thank you everyone for your wonderful questions. I think that brings us to the end of the trilogue. Just a quick reminder that the book is on sale in front for 25 ringgit. Please do get it today so that you can get it autographed by Mr. Martin himself. And also we'd like to have a gesture of thanks to Melissa as well for her generosity in the use of this phrase. Thank you so much. She's a very constant supporter for our local events as well as our local people and writers. Yes, and then we'd also like to let everyone know, I'm sure everyone's starting to, has been hungry for the past couple of hours on account of the rain. There are refreshments and cake served right here. However, we'd also like to highlight that next door in the Bendahari markets, we also have food, especially the famous laksa over there. So please do head over there if you'd like to. Yeah, if you'd like to sample some of that. So once again, please join me in thanking the wonderful speakers
Thank you,
today,
everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you.
as well as yourselves for coming here on this very wet day.
I forgot to mention, Kaya. I'm already working on my second series.
There you go.
And Sabelo 2024.
Okay, so let us wish Mr. Theseira well on his
Thank you.
next book. I'm sure we all would love to see come next year. All right, we'll be here again. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much. Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.